Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. RCMP say they've arrested Miles Sanderson, a man who was wanted in connection with deadly stabbings in Saskatchewan. A Medicine Hat man who says he can no longer afford to live says he wants to move forward with medically assisted dying. BCN's Angela Stewart has that powerful story. And a new program is launched in Lethbridge to help those who are developmentally disabled land a job.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. RCMP say the man who was wanted in connection with a stabbing rampage in Saskatchewan has been taken into custody. Police say they located Miles Sanderson near Rosthern in a stolen white Chevy Avalanche and arrested him around 3:30 p.m. local time. Rosthern is located around 40 kilometers north of Saskatoon. Sanderson was one of the main suspects wanted in connection with the stabbing spree that left 10 people dead and 19 wounded at the James Smith Cree Nation and in nearby Weldon, Saskatchewan. Police have ended the dangerous person alert. His brother was also a suspect in the stabbings. 31-year-old Damien Sanderson was found dead earlier this week at the James Smith Cree Nation. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says his government is really focused on helping those in Saskatchewan get through the crisis that rocked both the James Smith Cree Nation and nearby Weldon.
We are very much still in crisis mode. Over the past 2 days, we've been focused on doing everything we can to keep people safe, to ensure that they're getting the supports they need for the trauma that they're experiencing, the medical assistance obviously for those who are injured, but the mental impact and the anguish of this is requiring all of us to stay focused on well-being for people. There will be plenty of time for questions about what was done, what could have been done differently, what was done well. All those things I know we will be talking about for many weeks to come, but right now our focus is on being there for people who are hurting and who are scared.
There's a senior citizen in Medicine Hat who says he's looking into a medically assisted death. Les Landry says he simply cannot afford to live after losing his disability benefits. He says he can't afford essentials, including his medication. BCN's Angela Stewart caught up with Les to hear his powerful story.
If I am going to do this, I want the world to know just how bad this is.
Each and every day is a struggle for Medicine Hat senior Les Landry, not just physically, but also mentally.
I never knew that when you turn 65, your life ends.
On his 65th birthday, Landry says his AISH benefits were cut off, and he lost everything from his service dog allowance to medical transportation, as well as getting covered prescription refills, necessities he needs to get by on as a person living with a disability.
The revenue I get is actually less than what I used to get on AISH. My expenses went up 300%.
Because of the financial hurdles, day-to-day chronic consistent pain, and a lack of quality of life, Landry says he's now considering a different path, MAID, also known as medical assistance in dying.
My future looks bleak. This process, while I'm going through the pain and I'm going through the emotional turmoil and every other thing, this is not an easy decision.
Legislation has now changed in Canada. However, previously, the only people who could request a medically assisted death would be those living with a terminal illness.
The doctor just has to determine that the condition that this person has is not going to get better, which in this case is probably correct. He has a disability.
MLA for Cypress Medicine Hat, Drew Barnes, says he's heard from many who are struggling financially like Landry.
Utilities, the food inflation is crazy. We still don't have enough competition in our insurance business as well. It's very, very hard for people in modest incomes to make a go of it. But long term, the government of Alberta has to make life more affordable and make it so we all have more individual opportunity.
Those who do request a medically assisted death do have an option to back out of the process.
This is really about doctors and nurse practitioners deciding that they agree that your life is not worth living, and if they're willing to go ahead and do it, the law allows them to cause your death.
Are you ready to die with the help of doctors?
Yes. As I sit here right now, yes.
If approved, Landry says he's 90% sure he will be going through with a medically assisted death. For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
What a powerful story. There's help on the horizon for many of our disabled here in southwestern Alberta. Lethbridge Family Services has introduced their RISE program, which will help those who are developmentally disabled land a job. Jennifer Vanderkoy is the Program and Development Coordinator with the organization, and she joins us now from her office in Lethbridge. Jennifer, explain what RISE is really all about.
So RISE stands for Reaching Independence Through Skills and Employment. And RISE is a 10-month employment program for individuals with developmental disabilities. The participants will develop skills within the classroom and in their practicum placements to transition to competitive employment in the community.
So Jennifer, if someone wants to sign up for RISE, how should they go about doing that?
Yeah, if anyone is interested in connecting with us or learning more about the program, they can go to lfsfamily.ca, and there's information on our website. Also, the application process just opened up September 1st. So individuals can go on there to access the application. January 9th is going to be our start date. So we do encourage applicants to apply early. We only have 20 seats available for the RISE program. Funding may be available to eligible students through the Foundational Learning Assistance Program, and that's through advanced education. So yeah, we're very excited to connect with individuals who are ready, willing, and able to be employed and ready to work.
Great. Thanks so much, Jennifer. That was Jennifer Vanderkoy, Program and Development Coordinator with Lethbridge Family Services. The province announced that it is expanding contracts with surgical facilities across southern and central Alberta, which will reduce wait times and deliver around 2,600 more surgeries closer to home. The 1,250 more procedures will be delivered in our region in the South Zone. Officials say moving more orthopedic and other general surgeries into chartered surgical facilities will free up operating room space in hospitals. Premier Jason Kenney says it is important to get these surgeries done as soon as possible.
So if anybody tries to argue that contracting out publicly insured surgeries to privately operated clinics is risky or unproven, let's be clear, the data says the opposite is true. We contract out surgeries because doing that means we get more surgeries done more quickly, all of them publicly insured. And that's why we're moving forward with our surgical plan that we ran on, in addition to adding capacity in our public hospitals, because it's good for patients and it helps us deliver on the need to provide faster publicly funded care.
Premier Kenney added that Budget 2022 also provides $133 million over 3 years to expand and build new operating rooms and hospitals in many cities in Alberta, including Lethbridge, Medicine Hat, Grand Prairie, Calgary, and Edmonton. A number of dignitaries were in Coleman at the Crow's Nest Pass earlier today to announce the grand opening of the new 85-unit Peaks to Pines Seniors Lodge. The new facility offers 61 units for independent seniors and 24 designated supportive living units. The new 3-story building has a commercial kitchen, dining area, laundry facilities, salon, and multi-purpose areas. Health Minister Jason Copping says the supportive living spaces will allow residents to age in place in a home-like setting in their own community while being surrounded by both family and friends. UCP leadership hopeful Brian Jean was in Lethbridge recently. He visited with a number of people at the Lethbridge Senior Centre. Seniors who shared a lot of their concerns with him, but their biggest concern most of all was
inflation. They talked about prices going up, whether it's groceries, whether it's appliances, whether it's fixtures. And that's why I proposed a royalty-free gasoline and diesel program. You know what? We own the oil and diesel here in Alberta. Why are we paying royalties on it to our own government so they can go spend it? So I'm proposing that we would do royalty-free oil and gasoline for all of the oil, for all the gasoline and diesel that we consume here in Alberta.
Catch the exclusive interview with UCP leadership hopeful Brian Jean and myself coming up after Business News. And by the way, the UCP will be choosing their new leader on October the 6th. Well, that was another hot one across many parts of southwestern Alberta again today. Angela Stewart is in with an early peek of the forecast, and she joins us from beautiful Henderson Lake here in Lethbridge. Angela, some of our farmers have been asking when the rain will arrive, and you have the answer?
I certainly do, Hal. A low-pressure system is moving in tonight with a good chance of showers, developing with only a high of 10 in Lethbridge. Thursday, more rain is expected in the forecast, with only a high of 14 degrees. As for the rest of the week, I'll have all those details coming up later in the show.
Great. Thanks so much, Angela. A love story that took place during the First World War has now been released. It is featured in a book called Lethbridge, A Tale of Love in a Time of War. The characters dig into the trenches of France and the subsequent military hospitals of England. Now, the story also brings readers to our city here in Lethbridge. Alberta author Terry McConnell says the book is historical fiction and was inspired by his own grandparents.
The three main characters and a lot of the supporting characters were actual people who lived at that time in Lethbridge and in some of the other locales where the story takes place.
Former journalist and current author Terry McConnell wrote the book called Lethbridge, A Tale of Love in a Time of War.
The story is driven by actual events, things that happen, not just major events like the Battle at Vimy Ridge, which is a central part of the story, but actually even the things that happened to the three characters themselves happened in real life. I built a fictional story around historical events.
McConnell conducted extensive research for the book as he hunkered down in Crystal Beach, Ontario to get to work.
I was there for 7 weeks, and that's where I got down into the nitty-gritty of researching the book, and I spent a lot of time at that. Like, I didn't even start writing for probably a year after that. Ancestry CA was a surprisingly helpful resource. I gave them a nice little shout out in the acknowledgments of the book because I found out a lot of stuff that I didn't know otherwise. I also spoke to a military historian in Winnipeg, whose special area of interest is the Canadian Expeditionary Force that served in World War I.
The novel is currently in the process of being created into an audiobook as well.
I won't be doing the narrative. We're hiring a guy to do that. He has all the accents. He does a great East End London accent. He does a great Scottish accent. He didn't know how to do a New England accent. So I told him, I says, do Jack Kennedy. And so he did, and he got pretty close. It was pretty good.
You might recognize the high-level bridge in Lethbridge behind me, which is also featured on the cover of the book. McConnell says there's a potential for a future sequel to the novel down the line, but nothing's been set in stone quite yet. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Another book that I'll have to pick up. Thanks so much, Micah. Lethbridge residents are being asked to kick their clutter to the curb this weekend. You can leave your old pieces of furniture with a sign that says free on Friday night. After that, you can cruise around in your vehicle and pick up any of the items during the weekend. Kathleen Shepard, the Executive Director of Environment Lethbridge, says during the last few years there have been 400 to 500 households that have registered for this event.
I think we're probably on track for about the same number. This is Lethbridge, so the bulk of the registrations come in the week before. There's no question about that. Last time I checked, I think we were at about 150 or so, which is about where we usually are this time of year. It really is spread out throughout the city pretty evenly. It's been a little while since I've sort of broken down those numbers. I think there's maybe a few more on the west side, but it's not like a dramatic difference. It's pretty uniform across the city.
Shepard says more than 1,400 boxes of smaller items and nearly 750 larger items such as furniture were given away in 2018. A boil water advisory has been issued by Alberta Health Services. It's for the town of Bow Island. Officials say water to the town has been turned off so a broken water main can be repaired. Repairs should be done by the end of day Wednesday. All residents are asked to boil water for at least 1 minute for drinking, food preparation, and making coffee. Water used for bathing or washing clothes does not have to be boiled. More information about the boil water advisory can be found by calling HealthLink at 811. Researchers at BC's Simon Fraser University say they're hopeful that a promising chemical could help save millions of honeybees. The treatment would fight off mites that bite, injure, and sometimes kill bees. A chemistry professor from the university says her team's fieldwork is an important step in saving our country's most important honeybees.
Well, the varroa mite is a specific parasite of the honeybee, Apis mellifera. It actually switched from the Asian honeybee, Apis cerana, about 100 years ago to our Afro-European honeybee. And so in terms of evolutionary time, this is relatively short. And that's why our bees are so affected by this, because they haven't, in an evolutionary sense, they haven't had a chance to develop through selection natural defenses. People are working on that. There's a lot of very intensive efforts to find bees that are naturally resistant. The mites are a problem because they parasitize both the adult bees, the workers that you see coming and going, but also the brood. This is the developing young bees.
It is so important to protect our honeybees. Believe it. Sorry, I had to squeeze that in. Well, it was another hot day in Lethbridge, but a low-pressure system will be arriving soon, cooling things off and bringing some much-needed rain. Full weather details are coming up. It was another gorgeous day in Lethbridge, lots of sunshine and hot temperatures. BCN's Angela Stewart is filling in for Jeanette Rocher as our weather analyst this week. Angela decided to hit the lake, and why not? It was a great day for it.
I'm at beautiful Henderson Lake here in Lethbridge, where it's still quite warm. We got close to about 30 degrees again today. There's also a low pressure system arriving tonight with a good chance of showers and a low of 10 degrees. Thursday, more rain expected in the forecast with a high of only 14 degrees. That's pretty much the same picture on Friday. Clouds, showers, and a high near 14. Once again, not a bad weekend shaping up. Sunny and 21 degrees on Saturday. Looking to Sunday, a clear sky with a high of 30 degrees expected. Monday, a few clouds expected to roll in with the mercury dropping to 25. Tuesday, a mixture of sun and cloud with a high of near 24. Now checking the almanac, an average high for this time of year is 22 degrees, the average low 7. The record high was 35 set back in 1998 and a record low of -2. The sun rose at 6:55 and set at 8:03. Looking to temperatures across the country for Thursday, Victoria will be mainly sunny with a high of 21. Vancouver also sunny with a high of near 21. There's also a good chance of rain developing in Calgary on Thursday with a high of 16. In Edmonton, light showers and a high as well as near 16 degrees. Regina will see a few clouds at the high of 20. Saskatoon, partly cloudy with a high of 19. A chance of rain developing in Winnipeg with a high of 24. In the central part of the country, Toronto will be sunny with a high of 26. Sunshine in 27 for our nation's capital in Ottawa. Now sunny and 27 as well in Montreal. Moving to Atlantic Canada now, a good chance of rain and 23 for Fredericton. A mix of sun and cloud and 21 degrees for Halifax. Overcast sky and 22 for Charlottetown. And in St. John's, expect showers or even drizzle with a high of 16. And how that's a look at our forecast from beautiful Henderson Lake here in Lethbridge.
The Bank of Canada says it will continue raising interest rates in the battle against high inflation as it boosted its key rate by another 0.75 of a percentage point on Wednesday. The fifth straight rate increase pushed the bank's key rate to 3.25%. That is above what it calls the neutral range of between 2 and 3%. The Governing Council says the rate may have to rise further to fight inflation. It says the economy should slow in the second half of this year as global demand weakens and higher interest rates dampen economic activity domestically. Stats Canada says the country's merchandise trade surplus with the world narrowed to $4.1 billion in July. Exports declined following 6 straight monthly increases. The agency says the trade surplus was down from a revised $4.9 billion in June as exports fell 2.8% to $68.3 billion. It says the decline was due to lower prices as exports were up 1.7% in volume terms. Imports, meanwhile, fell 1.8% to $64.2 billion. That was led by a 4.2% decline in imports of consumer goods. A new industry-led report says Ottawa's targeted 30% reduction in nitrogen-based fertilizer emissions by the year 2030 is unrealistic. The report, commissioned by Fertilizer Canada and the Canola Council of Canada, looked at the impact of the target on crop yields and farm financial viability. It concludes that it may be possible to reach a 14% reduction in emissions from fertilizer, but not 30%. The Trudeau Liberals have said that 30% reduction is a goal and not a mandatory enforceable target. Officials say the target is achievable, however, thanks to required technologies and practices already used to help reduce emissions. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 153 points on the day to finish at 19,241. The Dow was up 435 points to 31,581. The S&P 500 was up 71 on the day to 3979, and the Nasdaq was down 246 to 11,791. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 5.10 to 81.78 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 29 cents to 7.85 US. Gold was up 6 cents to 17.1843 US an ounce, and silver was even on the day at 18.46 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $11.02 per bushel, barley's at $8.25, canola's at $17.25, and corn is at $11.81 per bushel. Live cattle were down 80 cents to $144.25, feeder cattle were down $2.15 to $183.95, and lean hogs were down 3 cents to $91.07. All three are October contracts. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 76.18 US. Recapping one of our top stories, RCMP say the man who was wanted in connection with a stabbing spree in Saskatchewan, Miles Sanderson, has been taken into custody. Police say they located Sanderson near Rosthern, Saskatchewan, and arrested him around 3:30 p.m. local time. Sanderson was one of the main suspects wanted in connection with a stabbing rampage which left 10 people dead and 19 wounded at the James Smith Cree Nation and a nearby Weldon, Saskatchewan. Police have ended the dangerous person alert. His brother was also a suspect in the stabbings. 31-year-old Damien Sanderson was found dead earlier this week in the James Smith Cree Nation. So how important is it for us to really count our blessings? Author Michelle Howe wrote a book on the subject, Grace and Gratitude for Everyday Life. BCM producer Michael Clausen caught up with Michelle to chat about her new book, and we'll have details for her shortly. And listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Are you going through divorce or separation? Find support and encouragement at Divorce Care beginning September 13th at 7 p.m. at City Light Church. Divorce Care is a weekly meeting held every Tuesday, and it's a place where you'll find a warm, caring environment during a difficult season of your life. For more information, visit divorcecare.org or call the City Light Church office at 403-329-3011. Big Brothers Big Sisters in Lethbridge is looking for volunteers to mentor children and youth in their various programs. Volunteers commit to one visit per week for 1 year. They have many kids that are looking for a big brother or sister. Make a difference in a child's life and start something big. To apply, visit lethbridge.bigbrothersbigsisters.ca, and for more information, call 403-328-9355. And that's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Most of us probably don't enjoy being around those who complain a lot. But on the other hand, if we look in the mirror, as we often do, we could see how thankful we are ourselves. Well, today's guest has written a book on the subject. Michelle Howe is the author of more than 24 books, and the latest of which is Grace and Gratitude for Everyday Life. Michelle, welcome to Bridge City News.
Okay, thank you so much for having me.
It's great to have you on. Can you give us a brief overview of your book and who it's aimed at?
You know, this book is one that I wrote because I knew that I needed to have more grace and gratitude in my own life. We've gone through a lot in the last few years, as everyone has ever since COVID, came out and stuff. But this book really reminded me that it doesn't matter what your circumstances are, that God's grace is always sufficient, and He promises to always meet every need we have. And the whole gist of the book is you can change your life without changing your circumstances by learning to discipline yourself to give thanks in all circumstances, as Scripture tells us to do, because it is God's will for us. Wherever we're in, He can redeem it, He can restore it, He can change it. And I think if people say, well, how can I give thanks if I have a husband who just left me? How can I give thanks if my child died? How can I give thanks if I have cancer again? And it's never about really giving thanks for the situation. It's seeing the bigger picture and realizing that everything that happens to us, around us, or surrounding us, God will use to mature us and he'll change our character so that we're more like Jesus Christ, which is what we're on the earth for, is to be transformed into the image of Christ so that we can therefore affect our world. So this book is all about real life, hard circumstances that I share in all 30 chapters, and how each person learned to lean in hard to the Lord and then eventually give thanks. And then it didn't become eventually give thanks. People start learning to give thanks immediately by faith because they know God's hand is in the situation.
Well, that's really good. And I would agree that there's definitely a lot of struggle in people's lives. And when you were talking, it was making me think about Joshua 1:8, where the Lord talks about how we'll make our way successful. So do you really believe, or are you saying that God can actually create a grateful heart within us?
Absolutely. But I believe, like any other um, aspect of maturity and character quality that we have, they're hard won, and He expects us to do our part. So I have a chapter about a woman who's really negative about everything. And people would ask her, she'd see the negative in every situation, and people start challenging her. And I write in the book, well, how do we change that negativity? And it's one thought at a time. And people don't think that, but we become what we think. So if we spend each morning or evening, sometime every day, renewing our mind by reading scripture, taking a verse with us, and I can't remember all the addresses of verses anymore, but I know they're there, but I'll write them down. And I know what verse I need that day, and I carry it with me. I reflect on it, I meditate on it, I pray through it, and I ask the Lord to make it real to me so that if I need comfort that day, He's comforting me through His word, which is always truthful, and His promises never fail. And I think we have to do that. And about the woman, or just changing your attitude, it can become your default response to choose gratitude. But again, it's like any other discipline. If you're eating too many sweets, you have to stop. Is it hard? Yes, it's hard. If you don't want to get up for work in the morning, you get up anyway because you have to pay for things. So you go. And it's the same principle, that it's hard, but we start it with small steps. And I say one thought at a time, try to see God in the picture, try to look at things eternally. Because when your mindset is set on eternity, the hardest thing becomes more manageable, because one day you're going to be in heaven. And people without faith, who aren't believers, have no such hope. So we should be the shining lights in this dark world, no matter what we go through.
Right. So I am thankful that you mentioned the lady, the example from your book, who was really struggling and was having the negative mindsets. One thing that my wife did when her parents passed away was she got a journal, and she called it her thankfulness journal. Can you maybe talk about how important it is to actually have a journal and write scripture references and other things down?
Absolutely. And I will go back to the Old Testament and give the example of the Israelites, who we as modern day believers will read all these Old Testament accounts and think, wow, they forgot what God did. They're so faithless. They're so not thankful. What's wrong with them? But we really are not any different. And that's why a journal is so important. And some people get intimidated by the word journal, but everybody's can look different. And I love what your wife does. And that's what I do. I will write down things I'm thankful for, but I always write down verses over issues that I'm praying about. And then I can look back 6 months, a year later, whatever, and I can see God's faithfulness in situations where I remember thinking, how is this ever going to work out? It's awful. And it's just a good reminder. And God tells us we need to be good rememberers, not of sin, not of past things, not of regrets, but of His faithfulness. And the more we remember, it shores up our faith in hard times. And it also gives us an attitude, or a spirit of thankfulness and gratefulness. And His grace is always sufficient. It is always sufficient. And when we have a journal to reflect on, we will remember the incidences and how He came through for us in normal, everyday ways and in supernatural ways. So it's just a good habit to get into.
That's great. And I know it's been very helpful for my wife. And even though her dad passed away 6 years ago now, she still maintains journaling every single day, and it has helped so much. Could you talk maybe a little bit while we're on the subject about grief and how the attitude of grace and gratitude in our lives can maybe help someone going through the grieving process?
hmm I have a story of a woman who lost her adult son in a tragic way. And at first, like every person who loses a loved one, she was sorrowing and she was grief stricken for months, months and months. But yet the Lord was quietly working in her heart. And as she began to heal and began to just do normal everyday things and really get plugged back into her normal life, she started to be passionate about sharing the gospel with people in a fresh way, a way she had never done before her son had died. Because for her, she saw the brevity of life. She saw how fragile life was in a fresh way. And she wanted every person, every family member, friend, neighbor, colleague to have the opportunity to hear the gospel and become a Christian. So I believe God can do that in all of us. And not that I say you rush through grief. No, everyone's different. And we sorrow. This is a broken, hard world. And we have emotions and we have to deal with it. But a lot of times the Lord will use what's we deem as the worst as something that ends up being something that's the best that ever happened to us when we reflect. And God uses that transformation that He works in our hearts to comfort and come alongside other people who are hurting and love them in a way that we wouldn't have been able to had we not already suffered ourselves.
Right. So a lot of times when we go through difficult challenges, we may get a little too self-centered or self-focused. Can you maybe share with us how this self-focus relates to gratitude in our lives?
It really does in a big, significant way. And my previous book was called Finding Freedom and Joy in Self-Forgetfulness. And self-forgetfulness is not a common term. And people always say, well, what do you mean by that? And I said, it means being proactively self-forgetful. And how do you do that? Most of us are so consumed with meeting our own needs that we take God out of the picture. So what are we? Worried, we're fretting, we're anxious, we're sick because we think it's all up to us. And what God says is, no, it's up to me to meet your needs. You need to relinquish them to me. You need to lean in and trust me, wait on me. And a lot of our life is honestly spent waiting for God to work or to come through, but He's never late. And I think the more self focused we are, we become independent and prideful because we think we've got this. But God's saying, no, 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 you don't have it. I have it, and I will work in a supernatural way to meet your needs, but you have to lean on me. And I think that's a hard lesson for all of us. It is for me. And I have to remind myself when I'm in any trial, pray first. Don't start playing mom fix it or grandma fix it and enter into places where maybe the Lord doesn't want me to. But pray and read scripture, meditate on it, and wait on Him to do the work that He wants to do.
Mm-hmm. I know I have a question about patience because I know that I think that grace and patience are probably two identical twins that we see in the verses of Scripture. Sometimes we're waiting for answers and it seems to be taking way too long. Can you talk a little bit about the wait problem? I know I have it. So
Oh, I don't know anybody who doesn't have it, to be honest. I have maybe one person I know in my life that I've known that doesn't have a problem waiting. But I think because here, us living in America, I don't know what it's like in Canada, but we're taught to pick yourself up and be independent person, work hard, you can accomplish anything, and all these messages we've been brought up with since childhood. And yet, so often, the Lord's ways are mysterious and different and much slower. And I'm always reminded that He's doing 10,000 things we can't see, but we're aware of what, three of them, I think is the quote. And it's so true in my own life. And when I have learned to discipline myself to not grumble or complain about a situation, which is hard, and say, okay, Lord, I thank you by faith for this difficulty, this suffering, this trial, because I know you're in it with me, even if I don't want to thank you for it, because it's so hard. I also have to then wait on Him to work or to resolve or to redeem. And sometimes the waiting is years. Sometimes the waiting may not come in my lifetime. But if I trust Him and I spend time in the Word every day, his character is so trustworthy. And I think that's one thing modern Christians are not doing is spending enough time in the Word. And how can you trust a God that you don't know? But yet, Scripture is just full of verses that describe his character. He's all powerful, he's sovereign, he's loving, forgiving, righteous, holy, pure. I mean, he merciful, compassionate. If people would read those verses, write them down, and put them before their mind's eye and their literal eyes, and meditate on them, the problem will shrink because God is bigger than any problem that we face.
Yes, absolutely. I could not agree more. Thinking more about the Bible, there were those 10 lepers that were healed in Jesus' account, but only one of them came back to thank him. What can we learn about this return to the Savior and the gratitude of this person?
Well, and I think again, often we read the Old Testament accounts of the Israelites and how miserable they were, and they weren't thankful either. And then we think, what was wrong with them? But really, we're not that different, because when we're faced with something and say God blesses us, how often do we immediately thank him? Oh, I think I am a grateful person, but my husband might say I'm not as grateful as I think I am, because our hearts are deceitfully wicked above all things. They are. And even as redeemed people, we still have that stain of sin in us, and giving thanks isn't always our first response. And I've read that story so many times, and I've been just aggravated that 9 of the 10 didn't go back to Jesus and say, thank you, I just don't understand it. And then it was like the Lord was speaking to my heart and saying, but you don't always give thanks. You have a roof over your head, you have clothes to wear, you have food, you have cars, you have, I mean, just material things. You have so much. You have my presence, my forgiveness. You have eternal life, Michelle. And I think we have to rethink honestly and be introspective and ask the Lord, am I a grateful person? Am I? And we have to hone gratitude like we hone any other character quality that we think is valid and is essential to our walk with Christ.
Yes. Yeah, I know the New Testament talks about having the mind of Christ. So how do you feel the attitudes of grace and gratitude maybe become part of that new mindset?
Well, they really are essential. They are essential. And people sometimes think that gratitude is like an add-on. It's not. If you're not grateful, then you really are in a wrong place in your heart. Because if you are saved by the sacrifice Christ gave on the cross, we should be grateful every day, all day long, thinking that he chose us and we will escape the horrors of hell. And that's a starting point. But I know a lot of Christians who are not grateful at all. And then you start walking them back, but it's because they have expectations. They have idols in their heart. They want material things. They want a different job. They want a different spouse. They want a different life. But they're not seeing the bigger picture that God has placed each of us in a certain place in our world to minister and love and serve. And we need to really be on his page and on his timeline, not our own. And a lot of times people just don't see it. And I think, again, it goes back to not being in church on Sunday and hearing God's word preached boldly and faithfully, not fellowshipping with other believers, and not having their minds renewed every single day, because the world is blaring a completely opposite message. And none of us is immune to that. So, again, that heart of gratitude is absolutely essential. Otherwise, you serve, but then you expect people to give you a pat on the back. Most people won't. You're serving the Lord. It doesn't matter what other people are doing. Our hearts, our service, our lives are to be given over as bondservants to Christ. And is it easy? It's never easy. That's why they call it dying to self every day. But I think gratitude and the grace that the Holy Spirit infuses in us, it's enough. And we know it's enough if we're really honest.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Michelle.
Thank you. This was just a wonderful interview. Have a good day.
Thank you. Michelle Howe is the author of Grace and Gratitude for Everyday Life. You can find Michelle's work online at www.michellehowe.wordpress.com.
The United Conservative Party will be choosing its new leader on October the 6th. Now, one of the leading candidates to succeed Jason Kenney as premier is Fort McMurray-Lac-La-Biche MLA and former Wildrose leader, Brian Jean. Brian, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Thanks very much. A pleasure to be here.
Now, the last time we chatted during the first UCP leadership contest, I asked you if you're going to take your ball and go home if you didn't win the leadership. So let me ask you again this time, Brian. Will you quit provincial politics if you don't win this time around?
Well, are you asking me if I have to stay forever in politics, or are you saying to me that if, 3 of my family members die and I'm the executor and I have to go back to take care of 3 local businesses that employ 25 families, should I go back or should I let them, close down and not worry about my parents and my family? And I'm just saying to you, there's other things besides politics in my life. And I went back in a situation, I had 3 close family members die within a space of a year of me leaving politics. I had my wife medevac to Edmonton and almost lost her and our child. Listen, folks, things happen that are more important than politics. For instance, family. We had a lot of health things going on. It depends on the circumstances. It depends if my boss passes me in the hallway every day for 4 months and doesn't say, "Hey, Brian, how's it going?" If he doesn't talk to me or she doesn't talk to me for 4 months, you know what? I might take my ball and go home. It all depends who the leader is and how the leader treats the other people that were in the leadership contest.
So you'd be willing to stay on as MLA and support the new leader then?
Absolutely. I absolutely will, especially if it's me. That would be awesome, because I think with my 10 years of federal politics, my 10 years as a litigator, even constitutional law, and my 3 years as an MLA and leader of the opposition, I know how to unite people. Remember, during that period of time that I was the leader of the Wildrose, I had a couple of wild MLAs. I never had to kick anybody out of my caucus, and nobody quit my caucus. I had to suspend somebody just for 30 days, but that was a different issue. That was, to be honest, Eric Fildebrand, who is a well-known independent thinker, and another person in my caucus for that period of time was Drew Barnes. These people were empowered by me. They were united by me, and I can do it again. I took the Wildrose from 2 MLAs and took it up to 20, and then we stayed together, and we're the official opposition. When the other parties were disintegrating around us, we stayed there, and we were solid, and we stood up for Albertans and fought the carbon tax, fought Bill 6, made sure that we stood against Notley and Trudeau, and I think we were a very effective opposition. And now I've got my personal affairs in order. I am a business person for 30 years, and I have several businesses still up in northern Alberta, but I'm trying to deal with that. I have good people running them right now, and I hope that they can stay and be as profitable as they could be. But the truth is that I'm focusing everything I possibly can on politics, because nothing is more important than Alberta politics today. We've got what's happening with Justin Trudeau and our attack on our autonomy here in Alberta, and the attack on our very way of life. And I think we have to stand up against it. That's why I'm coming back to politics, so I can be that voice that we thought we heard, but then there was no action. I'm going to take action. On day number 1, I'm going to serve notice on the other premiers and the Prime Minister, Section 46 legal notice that we want to go to constitutional negotiations. And according to the reference case on paragraph 69, we get the opportunity to do so, and the Supreme Court of Canada will enforce that for us. So that's what we need to do. We need to go open the Constitution, have that discussion. And you know what? Last night, we had a debate in Eastern Alberta, and it was so good to see a couple of the other candidates come on my side and say, yes, we're going to have to open up the Constitution and admit that. So, folks, that's the only way we can do things. That's the only way we can fix things, is we have to sit around the table with the other people involved, and that's the other premiers and the Prime Minister, and try to fix it, because it's not working right now. Canada's broken, but I think we can fix it. I think we can.
Now, many of us here in Alberta, Brian, are quite concerned over the doctor shortage here in our province. What's your plan for addressing the issue should you become premier?
Well, immediately allow the 700 nurse practitioners to start doing what they were trained to do, and to get to the table and negotiate something immediately and get them working so they can start practicing. And they're not practicing right now. Also, to make sure we take our nursing situation and then try to increase our nurses by 30 to 40% in the short term. How we do that is we, without spending any more money, right now 120% of the wage of nurses is in overtime. That's right. We spend more on overtime than we spend on wages. We could literally give our nurses a 10% raise, double the amount of nurses, and spend the same amount of money, and not burn out our nurses, not have them flee the province for other jurisdictions that give people good quality of life and protect and stand up for nurses, doctors, and teachers. These are the pinnacles of our community, and we need to stop treating them like they're they are the people that keep our communities together. They are the pillars of which our communities are usually founded on. And I know how important they are in rural Alberta. And I can tell you, I haven't had a doctor, my own doctor, for 30 years in Fort McMurray. So I know what it's like to have a doctor shortage, I promise you. Fort McMurray is one of those places where we have a huge number of people come from outside of our province and utilize our services, and the locals just, are left behind on a lot of cases.
A number of municipalities, including your region of Wood Buffalo, have expressed concern with the province centralizing the EMS dispatch. Now, officials say it's in an effort to save around $6 million annually. A number of mayors say it's simply not working since it's taking ambulances far too long to arrive at residences, especially in the rural areas. Now, would you decentralize and give the power back to the municipalities?
Immediately.
And why would you do that?
Because it'll save people's lives and respond quicker. Somebody in downtown Calgary, Edmonton, does not know where Anzac, Alberta is. They have no idea about local geography. And we need to make sure that we have people that are locally concerned about what's going on. And we have people that are be able to dispatch so they understand locations, they understand specifics, they work more quickly. There's no question that the more authority at the local level, the better the response time, the better the concern is going to be. And frankly, the better you're going to increase the resources or decrease the resources depending on what your needs are. Somebody in Calgary doesn't know what I need in Fort McMurray, nor do they know what you need in Lethbridge, and I'm going to decentralize it immediately.
Now, there was a serious push by Premier Jason Kenney to have our own provincial police force. Brian, where do you stand on the issue? I mean, many Albertans I've chatted with are quite happy with the RCMP doing the job here in Alberta.
Oh my, I'm happy with the RCMP doing the job they do for the communities they do it in, and I think they should continue to do that as long as those communities want them to do that. You see, up there's a sign that says autonomy for Albertans. I mean that. Autonomy means freedom of choice. That means that if my body, my choice, but it also means if communities want to have the freedom of choice to pick the RCMP, which is a premium police force, and I've heard as much as $250,000 an officer per year, if they want that premium police force, they should have the opportunity to have that premium police force. But if they don't, they have an opportunity to have part of a provincial police force, part of a city police force. We currently have Calgary and Edmonton and Lethbridge City Police. We have other police forces around the province, and we have Indigenous police forces, and it's growing. I think choice and opportunity will get us, frankly, better outcomes. And for the more competition we have, the more options we have, the better the prices are going to be, and frankly, the better the service is going to be. And that's why I believe in freedom of choice. That's why I believe that we should keep the RCMP, and if communities want to hire them to do the work that is so important, let's do it. But my major concern on this whole policy issue is really, truly, are we going to keep enough police officers? Because I don't think we have enough police officers on the ground right now in rural Alberta. I will tell you that I keep hearing stories about people chasing people that are stealing quads or snowmobiles or trucks or whatever out of their yard. It is not acceptable. We need a better response time on the ground by police officers. I spent 10 years in the justice system here in Alberta, practicing law, and I can tell you I have some great ideas on how to improve the justice system and not just make it available to people who have money. Because right now, that's what it appears to me, that if you have money, you can get justice, but otherwise it's very unlikely.
Now, a number of law-abiding gun owners, Brian, are angry at the Trudeau Liberals over Bill C-21. They say it's really doing nothing to address gun violence in our country and the gangs. They should be going after the gangs instead. Those, especially in rural Alberta, are very upset. How do you see it with Bill C-21?
I see it the same way. I was part of the government for Harper that voted to end the long gun registry. I was very proud to do that. I'm a sports gun owner. I also have restricted weapons permits since I was, I think, 18 or 19 years old. I'm one of the most vetted people on the entire planet, as are all Canadian gun owners, because I will tell you, they check everything to make sure that we're adequately trained and skilled and not dealing with any mental stresses around us. And I think that right now it's a total infringement. And what I would do is, I don't like stop work orders or, work to rule situations. But in this particular case, we have to slow things down as much as possible and hope that we get a conservative government in Ottawa that understands that the people that own these rifles and duck hunters and sports shooters are not the people that are causing the problems. The people causing the problems are criminals who are not going to obey the law. They are going to bring the guns in from the United States, which they are currently doing, and they are not going to obey any law in relation to what they do. And those are the people that sell the guns to the people that go out and do these horrific crimes. We have to make sure that we have better mental health in our hospitals, but also my proposal is to bring mental health training into grade 6 plus up to grade 12, a half an hour mandatory a week, so that our children can have training at the very youngest possible age on how to reach in the toolbox and pull out that tool that they need to deal with that mental stress, whether it is a death in the family or a separation or a divorce of their parents, or people need more mental health training. And right now, I believe we're in an epidemic state.
So, Brian, let's also talk about your plan for tackling crime and the opioid crisis in many regions of the province. Stats Canada says Lethbridge is right up there when it comes to the crime severity index. How would you, as a premier, work with the municipalities in addressing crime?
You know, it is an ongoing problem. I was in Lethbridge last week and I saw the tent cities. I saw what was going on. I do understand the dilemma there. I'm very concerned about it. I've been searching and looking at other opportunities around the world as far as empirical data to find out how other jurisdictions deal with these situations successfully, because that's the key. You know, most of the time, the people that commit crimes are either young people, you know, under the age of 18 or 19, or people that have addiction problems or mental illness, or frankly, poverty. And as a province, we have to deal with those issues firsthand. And I think the underscoring situation is, frankly, mental health and education in our schools, and to make sure that we bring as many people as we possibly can up as far as we can, so that they are educated, they are trained, they have the ability to get jobs and success. And in the meantime, what we have to do is have more officers on the street that have training on mental health issues. And, you know, some of the proposals that I think are in response to the provincial police force, and in particular the social workers, you know, I think they had a proposal of 60 or 70 social workers that would be hired with the provincial police force. Well, I don't think we have to stop hiring them just because we don't do a mandatory provincial police force. I think we should look at getting that opportunity so they can work with police officers firsthand and deal with mental stresses and mental health the way it should be on the ground with the people that are committing a lot of the crimes.
Brian, a number of seniors who we've chatted with here on Bridge City News say they really feel neglected by their governments. Now, you visited a Lethbridge Senior Centre recently. What were some of the concerns that our seniors shared with you?
Inflation. They talked about prices going up, whether it's groceries, whether it's appliances, whether it's fixtures. And that's why I proposed a royalty-free gasoline and diesel program. You know what? We own the oil and diesel here in Alberta. Why are we paying royalties on it to our own government so they can go spend it? So I'm proposing that we would do royalty-free oil and gasoline for all of the for all the gasoline and diesel that we consume here in Alberta. 380,000 barrels a day is what we consume here. That's a lot of gas and diesel. But remember, that money comes out of Albertans' pockets, goes into the Alberta government, and then we pay equalization payments on that money. So I'm going to stop that, first of all, which will leave more money in Alberta and more money for Albertans. But it'll also lower it. For instance, in a couple of months ago, we had prices that it would have been about 30 cents a liter to remove the fuel tax and also the royalties on Albertans' oil and diesel, which is what I promised to do if I become premier, and I will do that. And it will mean the lowest prices of gasoline and diesel in Canada. It'll also mean that groceries will go down, appliances will go down, all those things that come in on trucks, the price will go down. All those things that come in on planes, the price will go down. All those things that come in for trains will also come down. And you know what? This will become a hub for airlines, for transportation companies, for jobs for Albertans. And that's why I think lower prices are better, because it keeps money in Albertans' jeans and makes sure we don't send it to Ottawa. The other thing is transmission and distribution charges for electricity. We're going to have surpluses over the next few years, and we need to pay down the debt for sure. But until those long-term bonds become due, we should use those surpluses and the interest derived from that to help Albertans with transmission and distribution charges. They are outrageous right now. We've overbuilt hugely in the past. Our governments have, both PC and NDP. And we have to stop that overbuild. And what we need to do is focus on making sure that Albertans can afford those huge distribution charges, those huge transmission charges, which we're paying right now, primarily in rural Alberta as a majority, but we're paying it right across the province. So what I'm saying is, let's lower costs as much as we can. The other thing we need to do is look at affordable housing. I'm a big believer in tripartite agreements and making sure that we work with groups like the Salvation Army, other groups. I'm a believer, and I know that there are a lot of really good groups out there that do a lot of work, and they do it for nothing. They do it because they love their Lord, and they want to do something, or they love their God and they want to do something. And there's amazing groups right across the world that do it. And we need to partner with those groups. We need to make sure that the government funding gets the biggest bang for the buck. And let's utilize those NGOs and the other groups that are available right now. And let's make sure we get good housing that then is going to have good management afterwards, because our seniors, frankly, for what they did for us in this country and what we have today, I think we should treat them a lot better than what we do. And we can't rely on Ottawa for it. Let's face it, Justin Trudeau's not going to help us. We need to help ourselves and our seniors right here. And I'm going to do that as Premier if I get that privilege.
So, Brian, we only have about 30 seconds left here, but I wanted to talk to you a bit about agriculture. It's a big part of our economy here in southwestern Alberta. Farmers are angry at the Trudeau Liberals for recommending they reduce fertilizer use. How would you stand up to Ottawa and support our farmers?
Well, the first thing is I wouldn't obey that particular law because it's an infringement on our jurisdiction under Section 92 of the Constitution. As I've mentioned quite a few times about the Constitution, we need to open it. People think it's a pipe dream. It is not. I litigated for 10 years. It's an agreement. We can go and we can renegotiate it. And every province in Canada right now wants to do it. They want to stop the pipeline. They've all joined the pipeline appeal. They want to open up the Constitution in relation to healthcare funding. There's a lot of provinces that are not happy with the distribution of votes across the country and corresponding politicians. There's a lot of things we need to do. And the only way we're going to fix any of this is, frankly, to open up the Constitution, give them on day number one, I've said I will give them a Section 46 notice under the Constitution, which is actually laid out in paragraph 69 of the reference case from Quebec. And let's face it, the Supreme Court of Canada thought they were laying the path for Quebec to do certain things. So they laid out the rules. And now Albertans are going to take advantage of it. We got a 62% vote on the referendum, and that referendum is the authority to open up the Constitution for negotiations. So that's what I'm going to immediately do. That's why I came up with the referendum suggestion when I was the leader of the Wild Rose. That's why I undertook a study with economists across Canada, and that's why I suggested a referendum was the only way to do that. Jason Kenney did that for us. Now let's go the next step. He didn't. I will.
UCP leadership candidate and Fort McMurray Lac La Biche MLA Brian Jean, thanks so much for joining us today from Calgary.
My pleasure. Thanks.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks for watching.